Hi, everybody. Welcome to Happy Hour live on the Brew Sports Network. Great to have you all with us today. Happy Hour is officially back and running after a little bit of a shake-up and some changes here over the last week. We are thrilled to be back with you. We've got some new stuff taking place for you now. We're going to have more of a rolling panel of hosts here. We've got so many great people that are involved with the Brew Sports Network. We wanted to give more people an opportunity to come on and show their sports knowledge and just help keep Brew Sports growing on a daily basis as well, too. So you're going to be joined on Mondays by myself and Scott Wisniewski as well, too. So, Scott, a very good Monday to you, sir. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great. That's quite a build-up, though. That's a lot of pressure on me.
Is it?
Yeah.
I've been told that I give really good build-ups for the most part. Like, when I'm introducing folks, they're just like, I don't know if I can live up to that kind of a thing.
Well, it's great to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here, honestly, Scott. We've got some great stuff in store for you folks today. We're going to be joined in our second segment by Geoff Chiles to help us recount and hopefully recover from the chaos that took place in the Elite Eight over the weekend. I know that many fans here in the Wisconsin state are still recovering from the Badgers' overtime loss. I've got a couple of things to say about that a little bit later. I'm sure Scott does as well, too. So Geoff will be joining us here in our second segment. But before we get to any of that, we need to talk about some news that just broke just about an hour or so ago officially, Scott. The Raiders have officially done all the things they need to do. They have passed the official ruling, basically, to move to Las Vegas. So they are the Las Vegas Raiders. However, they don't officially get to play there until 2019 because they have to finish up next season in 2018. But it is official now. Enough of this talk, enough of this speculation. What do you think about this now that the Raiders are officially going to Las Vegas?
You know, the Raiders now become, the only team to leave a city twice.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So, it's a shame because you think of, on one hand, because you think of the tradition in Oakland and some of those Raiders teams of the 70s, and now they've got a little bit of a resurgence, and now they're going to leave for greener pastures and a new stadium. For Vegas, I'm interested to see how sports is going to do. They have an NHL team now, and now they have an NFL team. And the city is growing a little bit, even though they're like the 40th largest market in America.
Right.
But I think where they're going to get a lot of their fan base, because it's such a tourist town and there's a lot of people who go to Vegas for weekends during the football season. So I think they're going to do fine that way, and we'll see how that city embraces professional sports. But, I kind of feel Oakland's a rough city.
It is, traditionally.
I mean, there is really not a whole lot for people in Oakland to get excited about, and the Raiders were one of those things.
Right.
And now they lose a franchise, and they still have the Golden State Warriors, technically, that play there. They still have the Oakland A's, but the Raiders were synonymous with that city for so many years, and, I don't like to see any teams leave because it means that it's going to hurt the economy of that city. It's going to change the quality of life for that city. And it's too bad, but it was something that was being talked about for the last couple of years anyway. It seemed inevitable, really.
It really was. Raiders owner Mark Davis needed 24 yes votes for his proposal to be ratified. He got 31. It was rather strange. It was the vote of 31-1. That one vote, and maybe I just don't know enough about this, the Miami Dolphins voted no.
Huh.
It seems like a very random franchise to be like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. You would have thought maybe, teams closer in that vicinity that maybe didn't want to lose the rivalry or something would have said no, or it just would have been unanimous. But to have a 31-1 vote seemed a tad strange to me personally.
Normally when you get somebody who votes against it, it's because they're moving too close to their market.
Right.
Vegas isn't that much closer to Miami.
Has nothing to do with it. I mean, they play in the AFC together, but still.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised by that when I found out that it was the Dolphins that said no to the move, but maybe they just are thinking long-term instead of short-term, and who knows? It's never officially sure why a team votes the way they do at times, but I think this move is certainly interesting, and I've had conversations on Brew Sports about this as a whole. Vegas is such a destination city, but very rarely is the home team going to be the team getting supported. I feel like if if the Packers come to town, if the Patriots come to town, you're going to just get droves of Patriots and Packers fans, or even Red Wings fans when they come to play the Golden Knights and all that.
Bronco fans, I would imagine.
Bronco fans, like you're never. I don't feel like there's enough diehard Las Vegas and surrounding area residents that are going to be like, I am now a Las Vegas Raiders fan. Are the Oakland fans going to commute? I don't know how this is going to work.
No, and here's the thing, because most of the football fans, there are football fans in Las Vegas, but they grew up not having an NFL team, so they've already have other allegiances.
Exactly.
So it's kind of why baseball hasn't really worked from an attendance standpoint in Florida, because Florida was so long without baseball. There are a lot of Yankee fans and Red Sox fans and transplants that live in Florida. So the only time they go see the Rays play is when Boston or the Yankees are
right.
So
you're exactly right about that too. For myself, that grew up in Florida, I mean, I would meet people left and right that would be Rockies fans and Rays. You don't really meet a lot of Florida Marlins or Tampa Bay Ray fans.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. Even though we've got Florida's got 2 professional baseball teams, it was always very strange to me that you would be like more so Boston and Yankee and Met fans, basically. But you get those random Diamondback fans as well, too, down in Florida. I was rather surprised by that. Well, I don't necessarily know. We'll have to keep an eye on this, I guess. But, yeah, the Raiders officially moving to Las Vegas. They won't start there until 2019, so Oakland has a couple of years to start getting the process going.
Which is always weird. I mean, I wasn't alive when it happened, but my father was. And he talks about the last year the Braves played in Milwaukee. And it was just such a bittersweet thing because fans weren't coming out because they knew the team was leaving. But the ones who did, the diehards, you just felt bad for because they were losing something they loved. So it's just always weird when a team – it's one thing for them to leave. It's another thing for them to leave 2 years from now. But we're leaving.
Yeah.
It's kind of like breaking up with a girl. But we're going to live together.
Yeah, for a couple more years.
For a couple more years, but we're not together anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. It's very awkward.
I don't understand that. I mean, I guess I know it takes a lot to build a stadium and it takes a lot to fund and all the logistical side of things, but I do feel bad. Like if I'm a Raiders fan or if I'm a young parent that has a couple of kids and like, let's go to Raider games. Well, they're going to be leaving in a couple of years. Where are they going? Why are they leaving? They're still going to be the Raiders. Well, they're moving to Las Vegas.
Right.
Well, then why should I be a fan of this team if they're leaving me? Like, that's the biggest thing. Why try to support something or show any sort of emotion to something if they're just going to leave you at the end of the day?
I agree. And, I don't know where this leaves the NFL. In some ways, I kind of wanted the Raiders to move back to L.A. because then you would have had the Rams and Raiders both leaving L.A. and then both coming back. But people have talked about another team that's in trouble. To me, there's another team out there that I think is going to move. And I
was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I think it's Jacksonville.
Interesting. Okay, I could see that.
I mean, we have a condominium. We do a timeshare out in Daytona. So every year we go in September and we go to a Jacksonville game. It doesn't matter who they're playing. I don't care.
It's a professional football game.
Yeah, and they'll play Cincinnati, and it'll be half Cincinnati Bengals fans.
Yeah.
And it's not because, Florida's filled with Bengal fans. It's that they don't have a lot of Jacksonville Jaguar fans. So I could see them moving, maybe San Antonio. I've heard rumors, I hope it never happens, about the league expanding to London and putting a full-time team there.
Yeah.
That's a travel nightmare. The sport is rough enough on these players from when it comes to travel and all these things. And now if you throw London in the mix and they're the only European team, that would be stupid.
I can't imagine that, honestly. I do feel like Jacksonville would be a little bit difficult just because they're putting so much money into that district now, like that football entertainment district in Jacksonville. So I feel like that would be something that I don't necessarily know financially if that would make the most sense for them to just pick up and move. You talk about teams that have been not successful recently. Could Cleveland maybe move one day, or could one of the New York teams, I know they're in New Jersey, could one of them finally move to a different independent stadium?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a different stadium if they built another one in that area, but they're not going to leave the metro area.
Right.
And Cleveland, they did it once, they left, but it wasn't because the fans weren't there. The fan base was there for Cleveland. It was a stadium issue, which is why they ended up leaving. And that's been rectified. Minnesota was a team a couple years ago that was in danger, but they fixed that problem by building a stadium. True. They were the ones that were going to move to San Antonio. They were the team that was going to up and leave. But it's funny how couple, $1 billion in a stadium kind of change your outlook on the city you're in. So.
I mean, $1 billion would change my opinion about a lot of things.
Absolutely.
The stadium is going to be $1.9 billion, and they originally thought it wasn't going to happen until Bank of America came along and said, sure, here's $680 million. Well, now, is it going to be Bank of America Stadium? I feel like it has to be if you're going to give them that, if you're going to donate that much money to a cause.
I would hope so. But the one last piece about this whole thing is there's been, for years, people have worried about sports in Vegas because of the gambling.
Yeah.
It's very Okay, first of all, it's a little hypocritical because people are already betting on football games.
Always.
Even if the team's not based in Las Vegas, they're betting on football games more so than any other major sport, okay? You throw that into the mix with the fact that fantasy football is huge. Now, I know it's not the same thing, but it is.
It is.
So for the NFL to be worried about the gambling influence, even so much that Bank of America had to come in because the NFL wouldn't allow a casino owner to put up some money. It's like, I understand you don't want your players betting on games like Pete Rose did for baseball, even though he says he didn't, but he did, and that's why he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. But if the fans are going to vote, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares if a casino puts up money for your stadium? When you're in Vegas, guess what? When you go to Vegas to watch a Raider game, 90% of those fans are going to go to a casino anyway.
Absolutely.
So who cares if the naming rights, or at least part of maybe not the naming rights, but part of the stadium is funded by a casino?
Yeah.
Because people are spending that money at those casinos anyway.
It makes sense to me, honestly. I mean, when you really break it down, I mean, it's very difficult to think that this is going to be fully funded without, gambling money. It's like, listen, guys, it's just you're in the wrong city if you're going to think like that. So
right, and it's not 1950. It's not run by the mob anymore. You don't have to worry about, the New York syndicate controlling outcomes of games, and I mean, it's a little
that might make
different.
things more interesting if they did. I don't know. Maybe the Raiders might actually be a decent team then if that were the case.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, we've heard other players come out as well too. Brandon Marshall came out saying that he thought it would be very difficult for young players that would go to the Raiders once the team moves to Las Vegas. He thinks it would be more tempting for them to get into trouble.
Any different than Miami? Any different than Los Angeles?
Exactly.
Any different than New York City? I mean, those are fun cities to be in. So, yeah, obviously there's temptation in some of those. It's not like Green Bay where, there's an Applebee's.
Not a lot going on in Green Bay.
And a tilted kilt. Other than that, you're usually pretty safe. But a lot of these other cities, Dallas, there's a lot going on in Dallas. Like, I don't know that it's going to be that much more different than some of the other cities that have NFL teams.
I completely agree with you on that. We're going to talk about players getting into trouble as well, too, and possible ways to fix that a little bit later on in the program. We're going to move on, though, to our one of our college basketball correspondents. Geoff Chiles is going to be joining us here in just a moment. The Elite Eight taking place over the weekend. Scott, you and I, of course, supporting at least the hometown team, the Wisconsin Badgers, going down by a last-second three-pointer in overtime. You still have some people still trying to recover a little bit. The Final Four is set now. South Carolina, you've got Oregon, Gonzaga, and UNC all getting ready to go do battle down in Arizona. We're gonna talk to Geoff about this as well here too. So let's bring in Geoff. Geoff, a very good afternoon to you, sir. How are we doing today?
Good afternoon to you, Baxter. And fear not, you're not the only one who's suffering a loss. My Wolverines are not out of the tournament as well. So
that is true. That is true. I mean, you guys certainly. It was a little bit sooner for you guys than the Badgers, I believe. But I'm still sad about the Wolverines losing because, like I said, they were my pick to win the national championship. So. A little outlandish, many folks believe, but at the same time, I mean, it's fun to try to shake things up. But let's start with Wisconsin and Florida first and foremost, because that still is ringing in the back of the ears of so many people as we go before we get to Florida, South Carolina briefly. But what stood out to you the most of that game? Speaking of Florida and the Gators as a whole.
Yeah, well, that game, I think it was just a situation where, again, I think I talked about it last week on one of the Brew Sports shows, is that, Florida had not seen a team like the Badgers that has been in the Big Ten all year, that has played that rough and tumble style. And the Badgers can really stretch you out, and they can shoot it from inside. They can attack you in the paint. They can do a lot of things. And I just think Florida sort of didn't know how to handle that for the longer portion of the game. But as the game wore on, they sort of understood how to attack Wisconsin and to get plays inside. And that was ultimately the difference. And then, of course, you had the fantastic ending where, I'm sure Badger fans are celebrating, and then, not so fast. And Florida comes right back down.
You're exactly right.
Incredible shot. And, for so many people who said this was a tournament devoid of a lot of buzzer beaters, well, we've had our share in the last few days.
Well, Geoff, here's the thing about the Badgers, and there's good and there's bad. So the good part about it is, this Badger team was such a senior-led team that even when Florida made that run late in the second half, you just kind of had a feeling the Badgers would somehow close the gap. However, on the flip side, you can't be that abysmal at the free throw line and not expect it to catch up with you in the tournament and in big games, especially the deeper you get in the tournament.
No, you certainly cannot. I mean, free throw shooting, as any coach will tell you, especially this time of year, you absolutely have to make your free throws. And I think you can point to, I would use the analogy for Michigan's loss, where they lost a few days ago and knocked out of the tournament by Oregon, except it was on the other end of the free throw. Of course, Oregon missing free throws, but then Michigan not securing the rebound, and that allowing the Ducks to make plays at the end and get that final margin. And then, of course, Michigan missed the final shot. So you're exactly right. It's on either end of a free throw. Whether you're shooting it, you want to make it, or on the defensive end, you want to grab that rebound and secure the possession and get fouled. So free throws, you're right, very, very critical in the tournament. And as we've seen, all these games coming down right to the wire, you have to make your free throws, no question.
One team that everybody is talking about right now for good reason is South Carolina. Badger fans, of course, are wishing that they could have had that opportunity to play the Gamecocks, but enough about the Badgers. We've kind of put that to rest, unfortunately. South Carolina, how real are they actually? Because every year we see some teams sort of emerge as a Cinderella. I thought it was Xavier, and then, of course, they were taught a very rude lesson in their game that they had to take on. But now the Gamecocks, they've found their way in the Final Four. Is South Carolina a legitimate contender going into the Final Four now?
I would say yes and no. I would say they've definitely earned their spot, and they've earned the right to be there with how they've played all tournament. They are just a lockdown defensive team. They're not going to give you an inch on the defensive end of the floor. And when you have a player like Sindarius Thornwell, who I believe is 6'10", 6'11", a lot of people marvel at his offensive ability, and he has great touch around the basket, but he's a long, lengthy guy that's going to affect shots for you. My only question, Baxter, about South Carolina is I think they're 105 in offensive efficiency in the nation, and every other team in the Final Four is in the top 20 in terms of offense. That would be my one hang-up on the Gamecocks is do they have enough firepower to hang with Oregon, to hang with North Carolina, to hang with Gonzaga? And I'd have to say at first blush, I think offensively that might be an issue for them as far as winning it all.
Well, and Jeff, obviously Gonzaga, a very good defensive team as well, but it's an interesting Final Four. Gonzaga, first time in the Final Four. South Carolina, first time. Oregon, their second time. The last time was 1939. And then you have Carolina.
Played at that team. They might not be alive anymore. That's a long
Exactly. And then Carolina, who's been to 19 of them. So, So tell me that, because everybody's thinking Gonzaga, North Carolina. I don't want to live in a world where Gonzaga is your national champion. So is there a chance that somebody, if it's not South Carolina, can it be Oregon? Can somebody win a national title as long as it's not Gonzaga? And obviously Carolina, the prohibitive favorite right now. But what's your take on the Final Four? How do you handicap this?
Yeah, this is a really interesting Final Four, and I've heard from a lot of people. We had people call into my radio show this morning and say, well, this is not a great Final Four. There's not a lot of blue bloods. North Carolina's your only blue blood. That may be the case, and that may be something that the odds makers in Vegas you're talking about are not going to be happy about, that, they're not these traditional blue bloods in the Final Four. But if you're talking about college basketball and good teams and teams that deserve to be there, well, that's these teams. That's Oregon. That's Gonzaga. That's South Carolina. They've all earned their way there. And as far as Oregon crashing the party and having a chance to win, you bet that I think they have a chance to win, because I saw what they did against Michigan. They took Michigan out of their game offensively. They have really good players on the wing, and Dorsey, who's scored, I believe, 20-plus points in 5 games now. And they've picked up the slack for Chris Boucher, their big center, who tore his ACL. And you look at Oregon, and Jordan Bell, their big man in the middle, has stepped right in. They haven't missed a beat. 11 points in the 14-point win over Kansas, and he blocked 8 shots in that game. So this is an Oregon team where a lot of people talk about Dylan Brooks and Dorsey and their offense. This is a good defensive team as well that I think that game with North Carolina, that might come down to defense in the end. And I think because of their defense, Oregon's going to be right there at the end.
Talking with Geoff Chiles here on Happy Hour. Jeff, stepping away from the teams that are still left, I'm always intrigued to kind of retrace the steps to figure out how we got to this point. Obviously, the 4 teams that made it, of course, very exciting, very commendable for them. But is there a team that obviously didn't make it to the Final Four that people should be paying attention to still, because they obviously, either surprised a lot of people or they were much more of a failure? Is it Duke, who lost, very early? Is it an Arkansas who rattled some people? Is it Notre Dame crashing out early? Who should people be paying attention to that is not here in the Final Four playing for a national championship?
In terms of like next season, going into next year?
Yeah, next season, or just in general, like, who else should we be talking about, as we put our bow on the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really had to think about this for a little bit, Baxter, but I would have to say it's West Virginia and Bob Huggins out of the Big East. They seem to make a deep run every year. I know Mountaineer fans are not happy that they haven't had the runs that they've had, but Bob Huggins coaches so well, and he coaches such an aggressive style of pressing defense that he has his team in it every season, even if they're not the most talented team offensively. So I have to say West Virginia and Huggins is worth every bit of his salt. He's gotten his Mountaineers there every single year, it seems like. He'll have them back there next year. I think West Virginia will have something to prove going into next season.
Jeff, one of the things I hate about College Booster sometimes is that right there. It's West Virginia. You should be thanking your stars that you have Bob Huggins and that you can be an Elite Eight contender every year, but yet there's people who are unhappy because the Mountaineers don't have a championship. Speaking of teams, though, that are young, so Kentucky, every year they're young and you think, well, they're going to be around for a while, but then 4 guys declare for the draft and they start all over again. Do you see that being the case for the Wildcats? Are they going to lose some of those players, or might they actually have a few that stick around? Because if some of them do, they're going to be right there again, obviously.
Yeah, you're certainly right. And a lot of people, it's funny, this is another discussion we had on our radio show this morning. Our intern at the station brought up that issue of can you really bemoan John Calipari and Kentucky and really criticize it? We know that college athletes, especially at top-tier programs in basketball and football, they come from disadvantaged areas. They come with, yes, they want to make it to the pros and they want to make money, but they might have extenuating circumstances. They might have a family member or family to take care of. And so when people bemoan these one-and-dones, well, you have to look a little deeper and look at the humanity of it and say, well, that might be true, but they have other reasons for wanting to leave school early and cash out and make money and support their families. As far as your question, as much as I would like to say that Kentucky brings their star players back and they build on that and they have sort of a deeper roster and they begin to have more upperclassmen in the program, I just don't see it. I think Malik Monk is way, way too talented. He might have struggled in that loss yesterday to North Carolina, but too talented of a player, and I think he will leave early. But again, that's just sort of the overarching question when I think about one-and-dones. It's like, well, that might be true in some cases, but in other cases, I think players are human beings too, and they have reasons behind it.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on that one too. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the thing that people could debate about until we were blue in the face. Should you have to play 2 years of college basketball instead of just one, like the NFL, or like with college football, you have to play a minimum of 3 years? I mean, every sport is totally different. I mean, baseball, you can be drafted when you're in high school, can't you? I mean, there's ridiculous things, and I get that. Football is different than basketball, is different than soccer, that's different than hockey. I get that. I totally do. But at the same time,
but from a fan standpoint, like, I'm fine with the fact that these kids make that decision. But both the NCAA and the NBA would be better if players stayed 3 years because, like, Kentucky would be so awesome in 3 years, and when they finally went to the NBA, they'd be that much better and acclimated themselves into the game. But that cat's out of the bag. Like, those days are long.
Do you think
gone.
though, like, if you are a very successful head coach and you've got a very young talented group of guys and saying, look guys, like, please, like, I don't know, how much do you try to beg them and say, like, stay for 2 years minimum, stay for 3 years minimum, then you can go, but, like, think about the championships we could win, think about the success we could potentially have,
or the knee you could blow out,
or exactly on the flip side, or the knee you could blow out, and the money that you would potentially miss out as well too. I mean, it's a hit or miss. It really is. Jeff, your thoughts about that?
Yeah, he makes a great point, and I applaud you for that because on one hand, I just made this whole case about how that players might have other reasons for leaving school early and entering the NBA. But on the other side of this, I am in total agreement as far as maybe raising the minimum age for players to declare for the draft because, I have friends and other people in the media that are big NBA fans, and they say, well, the quality of the NBA would be so much better, and I would agree with this, if players had to stay in school until they were 20 years old.
Correct.
Because a lot of guys, they're not in a starting five in a rotation in an NBA roster. They might not even be at the end of the bench. They might be in the D League, just hoping and praying to get their opportunity. And so the quality of the NBA, I do agree, I think is watered down considerably when you have these players. The quality of the college game has watered down considerably when you have players leave early. And oftentimes we've seen you can be a great player, you can be an All-American in college potentially, but just not ready for the NBA. So there's two sides to it.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that one too. Even if, from a personal perspective, if I was, a freshman star for Kentucky, thinking about that, really valuing my options, being like, look, if I get drafted and looking at the teams that are, potentially going to draft me, like if I look at the Lakers or if I look at whoever kind of a thing, and I really evaluate it, be like, am I actually going to get any playing time? Or like you said, would I get shipped to the D-League? I would almost rather try to go contend and be a star and a consistent player for a college team and try to go and win a national championship than trying to go play in the D-League. And yeah, I would be getting paid. Sure, I would be living my dream as being a pro athlete, but I feel like it would suit me better to try to still be a main focal point and perfect my craft than trying to work with a bunch of guys that are just hopeful to get a shot at playing, for the first team at some point.
Yeah, certainly. And whether you're on a winning team or not, I mean, I'm sure that's definitely a consideration. But yeah, you're right. I mean, for me, and I'm a college sports fan and I cover college sports, so I'm probably a little bit biased in this conversation. And I promise it's not just about Michigan. I'd like to see all college kids stay until their junior, senior year, because that's exactly it. Fans of college sports, first and foremost, you want the college game to be the quality game. And it benefits both leagues, because if you're staying in college to your junior, senior year, or your fifth year, or whatever, not only is the college game and your program and your university going to be better for it, the NBA is going to get a better finished product at the end of the day.
You're absolutely right about that one. All right, Geoff, well, we are going to have to let you run, unfortunately, but we appreciate you taking the time. Where can people continue to listen to you, as you mentioned, on your radio show, but also follow you on social media as well?
Yeah, you can listen to me Monday through Friday, 10 to noon Eastern Time, Sports Talk 1050, WTK The Ticket in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You can listen on WTK.com. You can download our podcasts on Audio Boom on Inside the Huddle. And you can follow me on social media on Twitter at Geoff Chiles, GeoffChilesITH.
Fantastic. All right, Geoff. Well, we'll talk to you again soon, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Yeah, you as well. All right, there goes Geoff Chiles, one of our college basketball insiders here on the Brew Sports Network.
It was a little therapeutic to finally get this Badger thing put to bed.
Yes.
But I did want to make a point.
Please do.
If you've watched as much sports as I have, and it's not because I watch ton of sports, although I do, it's because I'm old. But there's points in a game where no matter what your team is doing, you know that play is going to cost them the game. In overtime, the blocked layup, even though the Badgers were still up, I said, that's it. They're going to lose. And I was watching the game with my fans, like, you don't know, you're so pessimistic. Like, no, I've just seen it.
Yeah.
In football, it's the dropped interception on the second play of a drive that ends up being a 10-play drive and a touch. You just know. And I said, no, there's just something about the way that play felt that I thought that somehow, some way, it was going to be a deciding factor in the game. And that 4-point swing in a 1-point game, obviously a deciding factor.
You're right. I mean, for me, the biggest issue that I had with this, and I only got a chance to watch most of the first half, and then I was able to just go back and rewatch the shot at the end, basically. The thing that bothered me the most, and maybe just this is my ignorance with basketball, is why did the Badger players basically not provide more of a not a wall, but more resistance for that player running down the court. Like, if you're going to make a foul, you're then potentially putting the guy at the line to shoot 2 free throws or get an inbound pass.
Yeah, the only thing that I can understand, a lot of my basketball coach friends, and I had some conversation over the week, and I asked them the same thing, because I didn't play, but I love basketball. Yeah. I didn't play. It wasn't my sport.
Same here.
I was a wrestler in high school when basketball was going on, because I can't play basketball. But I understand the game.
Right.
And what they said was that everybody just kind of thought that the next guy had him.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to do anything foolish, do something that, where he'd put up a shot and you'd foul them and give. So they just thought that there'd be somebody there, and lo and behold, the first 2 defenders just thought somebody else was picking them up, and then he hits the miracle shot.
Yeah, that was the hard part for me, literally watching that back a couple of times as a fan. Like, I looked at it from a couple of different angles and a couple of different things, and I'm like, why did he, because when you look at it, when he takes the 3, there's like 5 to 10 feet of space between him and the next Badger player anywhere. I'm like, nobody's going to get that easy of a 3-pointer ever again. Like, I get it. He had to take a run and throw it and everything, but still virtually uncontested. He just had to make sure he had his feet set when he let go of the ball.
Sure.
Aside from that, but as make a foul, make a play, stick your hands up, do something. Like, that would have been my biggest frustration with that as a whole in the moment if I had been on the court or been Greg Gard.
No, I agree. And as frustrated as Badger fans were, once the dust settled, there is something amazing about this senior class in so much of the success that they've had. And Nigel Hayes was a great example of that. 150 games he played.
Unbelievable.
In 4 years. So that means that group of players was playing 37, 38 games a year, which means they were going deep every single year. It's amazing. And it's amazing for me to kind of relish in that as a young kid who grew up watching Steve Yoder teams and just awful basketball.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of an uptick when Stu Jackson came, and then Stan Van Gundy stunk again. And it wasn't until Bennett got to Wisconsin and that program became such a powerhouse.
Right.
In so much that there 20 straight NCAA tournament appearances. But it's easy for people my age to forget how bad it used to be for that program, both football and basketball.
You're right. You're absolutely correct about that. A couple of comments here on Facebook. Patrick says, I think a great example of the development is Frank Kaminsky. He grew throughout the years in college and really vaulted him to where he is today. I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, could he have left earlier? I'm sure he could have. A big man that can also shoot a three. I mean, that's kind of the way of the NBA right now. And now that you see him really develop the way he did moving forward, I mean, I think he might have I don't think he's going to be an elite player in the NBA, but I think he's going to have a good, solid, consistent career in the NBA because he stayed all 4 years in college.
Yeah, I think he'll be a role player that sticks around for a while who would never have been in the NBA if he left a year or two early. I just think that, again, by getting that chance to cultivate your skills. And there's always going to be the elite of the elite. There's going to be the Carmelo Anthonys who it's not worth it for them to stay. But most players would benefit both with their college careers and their future NBA careers if they stuck around at least one more year in most cases.
You're right about that. A couple of people saying hi to us on Facebook. Liz is saying hello. Jeff says, thanks, guys. Appreciate it, Jeff. Appreciate you coming on. Robert saying hello as well, too. Dave poses a very interesting question, Scott. He says, what was more impressive, Hayes' 150 games or Favre's consecutive game record?
I think just because of the brutality of the sport, Favre. I mean, the fact that he played every game and that team played that many games, I think that was a byproduct of that. But, man, I mean, an NFL quarterback and some of the things that Favre – and understand, I'm not the biggest Brett Favre fan out there. I appreciate and respect the player.
Sure.
There's a lot of things about covering Brett Favre that got uncovered that I'd rather just not even delve into right now.
Understandable.
But the fact that he was able to play through some of those brutal injuries that he was fighting through in a lot of parts of his career, I think that's just going to be hard to beat.
I would agree. I mean, how many times did we see him playing? Was it his pinky, his thumb? It was his thumb, wasn't it? That he I forget what he did to it, but he dislocated his thumb or something of that nature as well, too. I mean, considering as a quarterback, you need your thumb.
Sure, he played a whole season with a hand injury. He also, I remember the Bears game where he played with he had no business playing on the knee, and again, it's impressive. There are times though where you could make the argument, especially later, where he put the team in jeopardy by not taking a game off to heal himself, but. I'm not going to go there
right. There's a lot of different ways that you could go with that. Keep the comments coming. Remember to hit the share button as well, too, to let your friends check us out as we are continuing on through happy hour. Patrick is a little upset with us, Scott. He says, why do we not have anything to drink in terms of alcohol because it's happy hour? He's like, why are you guys not drinking during happy hour?
I'll make up for it on Wednesday.
Scott will be back on Wednesday for those of you that are wondering. And I wake up every morning at 5 a.m., so I needed some coffee to push me through because we have college road trip after this. So traditionally I would be going home, and so I'd be like, absolutely, I'd have a drink, but Barry Nelson just likes to hear himself talk, so we're going to have to put up with him for another hour after that.
Well, this is a long day for you, though.
It is.
I mean, really.
It is.
So.
No, but I do enjoy everything that I get to do, so that's why I went for coffee today instead of the cold brew, which I'll probably have one during college road trip. So two of the other quick things here to get to as we wrap things up. There's an article out, and we talked about this today on Halftime from ridingthepine.co. It's called the 2017 NFL Mock Draft Maximum Entertainment addition. And basically, some of the people, if you're like a middle of the pack team, like the Bills or the Colts or the Ravens, we don't care too much about your picks. It's more so about like the first 5 or 6 picks of what would provide more entertainment than actual realism, I guess, from a drafting perspective. This article has Mitch Trubisky going first overall to the Cleveland Browns, which immediately raises the red flag with me and immediately is just kind of a laughable matter because the Browns don't need a quarterback first overall. They need to draft Myles Garrett from Texas A&M to help shore up their very Swiss cheese-like defense. What do you when you think about Cleveland potentially drafting Trubisky first overall? Is it not the most Cleveland Browns thing you can possibly think of?
Well, sure. From that standpoint, what they really need to do is just go the route of what the Cleveland Browns did in the movie Draft Day. Just go out, roll the dice a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, I think with some of the things they did in the offseason, first of all, they're a long way away from being a playoff team. However, they did have a good offseason. They should be smart and just take the player that they have the most upside with. But yes, I could see the Browns completely botching this draft because you don't stay bad as long as teams like them and Jacksonville. You don't stay that bad that long without a lot of missteps in the NFL draft.
Right. The 2 other picks that kind of make me shake my head a little bit is Myles Garrett going to the 49ers. I think that's a smart pick for them, and they need more defensive picks. If he's there, take him 100%. If Myles Garrett is still on the board at 3 when the Bears are there, I would just be dumbfounded. That doesn't make any sense to me unless the team maybe trades up or does something crazy. Deshaun Watson, a possibility to the Bears at number 3. It's kind of a quarterback carousel right now. They've already signed Mike Glennon, but they've also been in the process of trying to bring in other guys as well, too, to kind of make it more of a battle going into the regular season. And with Jay Cutler, obviously nowhere to be found.
Look, if you're starting a battle with Glennon and Sanchez, all right, then you might as well.
In what universe
surrender.
did you ever think?
Surrender.
Yes.
If that's the 2 guys that you're going to put in as your leaders of a battle, just give up. Wave a white flag.
You're like, we're good, guys.
Yeah.
Green Bay, you guys can have the division again. That's totally fine. There's one thing on here that I thought was kind of funny, but also semi-ish realistic, and that's T.J. Watt to the Texans. Now, that would obviously be a lot of Watt overload on the same team. Is that a realistic thing to actually happen, though, to have TJ and JJ on the same team?
I think it's realistic. I think there's other options for Houston, though, at that spot.
Like a quarterback?
But like a quarterback, maybe another receiver. They could use some offensive line help. But again, T.J. Watt, and I know when we get closer to it, I end up being a big draft guy, but I'm late to the game usually. I usually wait till we're about 2 weeks out because people start talking about it in February.
Way too early.
They change their mock drafts 17 times. And,
yep.
So at least when it comes to the draft, I'm going to come around like I always do. I'll never come around on the combine. You can have that. I think it's stupid. I'll never be the guy who's glued to his TV on National Signing Day. Waste of time.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, I don't want to divert too much.
No, go ahead.
This is what I hate about National Signing Day. Things like this. Well, every year the Badgers will have the 7th or 8th best class in their own conference.
Yep.
And yet every year they're going to be one of the top 3 teams.
Always.
Because you're drafting high schoolers and you're trying to predict what that's going to look like 2, 3, 4 years from now. I think it's foolish. And again, I know it's never going away. I know I'm in the minority. I know people love that sort of stuff. But to me, I don't even want to talk about it. I could care less because in football, Alabama's going to be a top 2 program draft-wise every year. It's the same. Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State. It never changes.
No, never. That's the thing, too. I mean, as you're saying, too, about when you look at the draft, will these guys be able to play at the NFL? I think it's almost more difficult to an extent. I mean, I know they're a little bit closer to try to say, can this high schooler go and make an impact at Alabama? Or that's why I'm always so surprised when you see a true freshman excelling at the college level for a major program. That blows my mind, honestly, to see a 17 or 18-year-old kid just looking like a man among boys at times, depending on, I know, very rare cases, but I feel like that's almost a harder transition sometimes than if you go through 3 or 4 years of high-profile college football to go to the NFL after that.
It absolutely is. And listen, I was never that class of athlete in high school. But
same here.
But I still remember being 17.
Yeah.
You're far from a finished product. there's a lot of 17-year-olds who will at some point, they're going to be so highly touted and they're going to plateau. And then there's some other 17-year-olds that might not be highly touted and they're still they're still growing into their body. They're still, the sky's the limit. Yeah. So how can you sit there and look at a 17-year-old and go, yep, I got this one pegged. He's going to do this or he's going to do that.
Next grade outside linebacker. It's like he is, 6'3" and maybe a little over 200 pounds. And he maybe had a couple of good seasons because he was tackling 15 and 16-year-olds consistently. Who's to say that he's going to be able to go out and tackle, Leonard Fournette or somebody that's a, 5'10", 235-pound running back flying at him? That's going to be a lot more difficult.
Absolutely, and that's the other thing you got to take into consideration. So we don't know anything about the conference this high school player played in.
Yes.
But if he's getting a shot to go to the SEC, I'm telling you, whatever conference you thought was good in high school is night and day compared to what you're going to be facing every Saturday in that conference. So, again, you can look really good against a bunch of guys that should be playing JV high school football somewhere, but then you get to the SEC or the Big Ten or the ACC, it's a whole new level.
You're absolutely right about that. All right, last thing to talk about here before we run for the day. Remember, a little bit shorter shows here until the NCAA tournament is wrapped up, as we have a special edition of College Road Trip coming at 5 p.m. Central Time. I wanted to pose the question, Scott, about if the NFL offseason is too long. And the reason I asked that question is because there's been a lot of players getting into off-field trouble recently. Trevor Boykin was arrested earlier today for possession of marijuana after he got into a car accident. One of the Packers and one of the Bears players got arrested outside of a bar as well, too, got in trouble with the law. And I feel like there's almost too much downtime for these players, that there should be other things taking place and taking them away from their free time, because what's more dangerous than young, rich, semi-millennials running around with nothing to do for a couple of months is, you start to get a big head and you start to think you can do virtually anything, and then you ultimately end up getting in trouble usually at the end of the day.
Well, there's a couple ways to look at it, and there's two sides of the coin. First and foremost, it seems like there's more football players that get in trouble because there's 1,600 NFL players.
True.
So with sheer volume, there's going to be more of them that run into issues that, off the field. The other thing is, with all great athletes, they're at some point growing up told that they're the best and they could do whatever you want. But I think more of that happens with football players. I think if you're a star high school football player, you can do whatever you want, and nobody in most cases is going to tell you no. And then you go on to this big college program, and again, you can do whatever you want,
right,
and nobody's going to tell you no. So you know what? You do start to feel like you're the king of the world, and nobody can touch you and nobody can stop you. On the flip side of that, over the last couple of years, to kind of prevent injuries and lengthen people's careers, they've made mini camps and off-season workouts and OTAs not mandatory. So a lot of the things that might have taken up some of their time has gone away. And of course, if you want to get way old school, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s,
right,
a lot of these football players had to work in the offseason just to supplement their income, or in many cases become professional. Russ Francis, the tight end from San Francisco 49ers, was a professional wrestler in the offseason because he needed to supplement his income. Now these guys are making so much money, teams don't want them to, they don't want you working construction or wrestling or doing anything but sitting on your couch and going to the gym, and sitting on your couch and going to the gym. Of course, obviously young 20-year-olds, 22, 23, nobody wants to sit at home and do nothing.
No, especially if you're single. I get like certain guys that are, maybe, either engaged or have a wife or something. You're not, maybe you're going to keep it together a little bit more, but very rarely do you have a young, budding defensive back or a very young budding quarterback. Johnny Manziel's a great example of that, where he had the taste of fame, he had the money right off the bat, and he just said, the heck with it. I'm going to do whatever the heck I want and not care about any sort of consequences.
Sure, and the NFL has actually started to do rookie symposiums and try to work with the young players about, the temptation of, all of the vices that are at your disposal, and scam artists who are going to come out of the woodwork because you're young and you're rich. And a lot of times your own friends, people you grew up with, now figure, hey, this is my cash cow.
Yep.
And, you're thinking as a player, well, I've known these guys since first grade. They're not going to lead me astray. So you kind of just go along, go with the flow, and next thing you know, you're getting pulled over, you're getting arrested. So I think they're trying to educate the young players about, be smart who you associate with and what you do with your money and what you do when you're in the public eye. So, it happens quite a bit. on the surface, but really I think if you looked at the percentage of NFL players to Major League Baseball players to NBA players, it's probably close on a percentage standpoint. But again, the volume of football players that are out there, I think, and plus it's still the NFL, and people care about anything NFL. Hey, this guy got busted for jaywalking. He's an NFL player. Put him on TV. So
TMZ's all over it.
Yeah, and I'm not making light of some of the, obviously the atrocities that Aaron Hernandez is accused of.
Of course.
But some of the other stuff, a 21-year-old did something silly and was drinking. Okay, bad choice.
Outside a bar in Iowa.
Right. Bad choice, but still, a 21, you got to understand that there's going to be people that kind of fall through the cracks and don't always make the best decisions.
It's true.
I didn't make the best decisions for most of my early to mid-20s. So, and I survived, thankfully.
So you turned out pretty good.
Yeah, ish.
Yeah,
but,
that I know of, at least, right? Exactly. Yeah, there's really not I feel like an official answer with any of this. I mean, yes, the NFL certainly has things that they need to work on, but as you mentioned too, it is more blown out of proportion. I mean, very rarely do you see even somebody, I always use this as a fallback, the NHL or Major League Soccer or something, getting into trouble off the field and then it being such a national story.
Right, because we've had some really gruesome, if you followed some of the NHL stories in the last decade, one guy kidnapped his fiance.
Yeah.
But
barely heard about it.
Exactly. And again, I like hockey, so please, people, don't take this, but most people are like, it's the NHL, who cares? It's the NHL,
yeah.
Who cares?
Yep.
But if it was an NFL player, it would be everywhere.
Can you imagine? I can't honestly imagine what it would be like. The same case, like say, hypothetically, some guy on the Broncos kidnapped his girlfriend or whatever, like national news.
Absolutely.
International news, probably. Like even to put the last little bit on this, like I didn't even realize the Packers had a cornerback named Mannington Dorlett until today. I was like,
honestly, me either.
And they're like, the Packers cornerback. I'm like, who? I was like, where's he been? Maybe he could have helped play against Atlanta. I was like, who's this guy? I'm like, I don't even know who he is. So I was very surprised by that because I had friends being like, did you hear about the Packers cornerback? I'm like, who? And I looked it up. I'm like, he's on the Packers?
Yeah.
I don't know who this guy is.
Yeah, you're
news to me.
Was it Randall? Was it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't know.
Some guy that I've never heard of that I don't think has ever seen the field either, honestly. But something to keep an eye on for sure when you look at the longevity of the NFL is will they potentially try to enforce more things to keep guys out of trouble.
You know what they could do? They could bring back the old 70s staple, the network superstars, where they'd have like these tug of wars and these other like sort of athletic-y competitions where they'd get NFL players and basketball players and boxers, and then you'd keep them out of trouble that way.
Why not? I think that's a smart idea.
And there's so many cable channels now. They need more programming, right? So let's just bring back while we're at it, let's bring back the Battle of the Network Stars too. Why not?
Why not? I like it. Makes sense to me. All right, Scott, well, we got to wrap things up for the day. A very special thanks to Geoff Chiles for joining us as well, too, to help us recap the Elite Eight and some of that Sweet 16 madness as well, too. Special thanks to you as well, too, Scott. We'll see you back here again on Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Looking forward to having you back as well, too. Where can people find you on the social media spectrum to keep up with you?
You can find me on Twitter at ScottWasniewski2.
Okay.
So it's like Wisniewski, except the last I is gone.
Of course.
And you can find our podcast, myself and Jake Kokorowski. We are the Kielbasa Kings Sports Extravaganza. You can find us at SB Nation, Bucky's Fifth Quarter, and we just did a show with Jason Wilde, so check that one out. It's archived somewhere, yeah.
Phenomenal. All right, well, Scott, I appreciate you taking the time. We will be back with you guys again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central Time here on Happy Hour. Coming up next is College Road Trip with Barry Nelson and Ian DeMars, so make sure you stay tuned for that at 5 p.m. Central Time. Barry's got some great stuff cooking up for you guys that you're not going to want to miss. If you just need more college basketball, you're not going to want to miss it. So we'll talk to you guys later on. Thanks so much for tuning in to Happy Hour. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on Brew Sports.